It's great to see many of you again. Thank you for joining us for Writer's Room Query Letter Workshop. This is the fourth in our series, and we did record all of our previous Writer's Room gatherings, so you can always check those out. I'll make sure everyone gets the links after this. But we are very excited to welcome back our alumni authors, Marjetta Geerling and Kimberly Gordon Biddle. And for the first time tonight, we are also welcoming back Cory Eckert. And they'll all be talking to you about query letters, sharing their own, their examples, and walking you through what makes a good query letter, how to get started. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it right over to Cory to introduce herself, and then Kimberly, and then Marjetta. And Marjetta, then you could just take it away with your initial presentation.
Great. Hi, I am Cory Eckert. I graduated from Johnston in December of 2005. And my contract was in mythography, the symbiosis of creative writing and comparative mythology, which is like a real Johnston title because it has a colon in the middle of it. I have a master's in librarianship. I'm a working librarian, and my debut novel is coming out with Hachette Books next year. It is an adult, thank you, very excited. I have a 2-book deal with Hachette. So I have winter of 2022 and spring of 2023, which means I'm actually writing 2 books right now because they are due on the heels of each other. But the first one is, and they're both adult romances. The first one is a what we call FF in the industry, which just means that it's 2 women falling in love with each other. And it's a Christmas romance. So it is, my agent likes to call it Hallmark but gay, which I think is actually in my query letter. It's inspired by Hallmark Christmas movies. So that's what I am writing right now. I hope to, over the course of my career, write some middle grade and some other stuff, but right now I write adult romance novels.
Hi, my name is Kimberly Biddle. I graduated in 1987 with a double BA in psychology and music. I spent 28 years as a college professor, and I am now an emeritus college professor. I write children's literature, picture books in middle grade, and then I also write textbooks.
Hi, I'm Marjetta Geerling, and I graduated from the Johnston Center in 1995. My major was, just forgot the first part of my major because I have a colon, and then it's, women's culture and creative expression. There we go. Women's culture and creative expression, which is super fun to try and squeeze onto a job application. I am currently an associate professor of English here in South Florida at Broward College. And my first novel was a young adult novel published under my name, Marjetta Geerling. And as of February, I just completed my first romance series for adults published under my pen name, Mara Wells. So I have 4 books out in the world, which is pretty unbelievable. 2 of which came out during a pandemic, which I don't recommend. But here we are together, and I'm so excited that the Writer's Room has gotten so much interest this year, and thank you all for coming. So today's session came sort of at the request of people who've been attending. We've been getting, since homecoming actually, questions about the querying process. So I'm going to start off with some basics, and then Cory and Kimberly are going to delve more into the detail about the how to do the things I'm going to talk about. So I just wanted to go over some basics of the querying process. So this query process is it's the standard in the industry, and it's a sort of old-fashioned process that is very rooted in protocols and etiquette, right? And so part of the query process is learning what the etiquette is. And the first, knowing that you don't just send your book out there and hope people will read it. You first send this, what's called a query letter, that sort of pitches the book. It gives a little information about yourself. And if it catches the interest of the agent or editor, they then request more material from you. How long should the query letter be? What material will they request from you? It varies from agent to agent and editor to editor. So before you start querying, my advice is to prepare a query package, is what I call it, because if you send out a query letter and it's successful, I have heard of writers, they send a query letter in the morning and within an hour, the agent has requested a manuscript. I've also heard of people who send a query letter and 18 months later, they get a request. So you don't know how quickly the agent or editor is going to respond to you. So it's good to have the things that they might ask for ready to go before you send the query letter. So the first part of a query package is the query letter, which this workshop focuses on. And then a 2 to 3 paragraph blurb, which is sort of a marketing tool about the project, a synopsis, and these vary in length from 4 pages to 15 pages, depending on what the agent or editor says that they want. I like to go with the 4 to 5 page synopsis, and then sample pages of the project. Really, you shouldn't start querying until you've completed your first project, but you want to be sure that you have at least the first 3 chapters or the first 50 pages, if it's a longer piece, polished and ready to show. The other thing they might ask for is the full manuscript. So I probably should have put number 5, full manuscript, always a good idea. If you're writing picture books, you should definitely have the full manuscript on hand. And again, before you send that query letter, and Cory's going to talk more about the how to do this, but you want to do your research into the agents or editors that you're querying and look at what their particular preferences are. And they publish these because they are very particular. So you will find it on their website. Sometimes you'll find it in their social media posts, and they're going to tell you exactly what they want. So some want you to paste everything into the email, no attachments. Some of them want everything as an attachment. Some want it at each piece as a separate attachment. Some want it all in one document, attached in one document. So you have to look at each person that you're going to send your query to and tailor what you're sending to them to exactly what they ask for. They'll tell you how they want it sent, and that's the only way that you should do it. Sometimes they're so specific that even tell you what to put as the subject line of the email. Right, and so you want to pay attention to all of those details because, again, it's about the etiquette of this. And you're going to edit those query package elements that you've gotten ready ahead of time. You might have to go through and tweak them a little bit. So maybe you have a 5-page synopsis and this person wants a 2-page synopsis, right? Then you would cut it down. Or you've written a 4-page synopsis and they want a 10-page synopsis, then you would have to edit that. So you're going to edit it to specifically whatever they want. But before they ask for something, you have to get to the query letter itself. So when I was starting out writing query letters, I had a lot of help from the young adult author and poet Joyce Sweeney, and she is now a literary agent herself at the Seymour Agency. And she advocates for what she calls the 3-part query letter. And she calls the 3 parts, I love you love my book, you love me. And I have found this formula to be really helpful in organizing my thoughts when I put together query letters. So the first paragraph is I love you. You need to find out, why are you querying this specific agent or editor? Now we know, like, the real answer is, of course, I am looking for an agent and you are one. Please take me as your client, right? But agents and editors all have different personalities. They have different likes and dislikes. They have favorite genres and subgenres. They have things they won't touch with a 10-foot pole. So you have to do the research to assure yourself and them that your project is a good fit for their particular tastes. And if you have had any contact with the agent, if you met them at a conference or laughed at something they posted on Twitter, or just any kind of connection, you would bring that up here, why it's a good fit, And then, well, you know, basically trying to convince them that you have done your research and you know that you are not wasting their time. So this is why you would never say, dear to whom it may concern, right? Or dear agents. Nobody wants to feel like you've mass mailed them. So it's a small batch. You know, you might look at 5 people at a time and go through this process with them. Then parts 2 and 3 can stay pretty much the same for every letter that you write, right? So the first part is always going to change depending on who you are querying, but parts 2 and 3, once you've got a good version of this down, you can use it over and over again. So part 2 is you love my book. So this is where you pitch the book itself. This is a 1-paragraph project blurb. And then the third paragraph is you love me. So why should the agent love you? Why are you particularly qualified to write this book? Or what have you been doing to prepare yourself to be in the position to be the writer of this book, the marketer of this book, right? Why? And again, it's like, because I'm a writer and I wrote it. That's why I wrote this book. But if you have any personal connection to the content of your book, I didn't have to query for my Fairhaven Dog Park series, but if I were going to query it, in part 3, I would mention that my mother was a dog breeder. And I grew up thinking that dogs were my siblings, right? Because it connects to the content of it. If you're a subject matter expert like Kimberly is, right? She was a professor for 28 years of something, and so that qualifies her to write textbooks in this field, right? So you want to make that connection about why this book. So that sounds great, right? I love you, you love my book, you love me. I thought it would be helpful to see an example. So this I just copied out of my email, and I know that Cory and Kimberly are also going to show you versions of their query letters. And so you can see that it is exactly 3 paragraphs. I love you. So I had hung out with this agent, who's now my agent, Nicole Rossanetti, at a conference in Louisville, Kentucky, and we had a really fun time. We drank a bottle of wine together after the evening events. But I don't mention the bottle of wine here, right? I'm just trying to remind her. At this point, it's several months later. I'm not even sure she remembers me. So I met you at this thing. I met you at another thing. I remind her that she had offered for me to submit a manuscript to her. I remind her that I am good friends with her client, Kate Ballinger. I remind her that I sent her Stacey Ramey, who became a client before I did, right? And I tell her she is my dream agent because at that point she was, right? Is it kissing up? Yeah, that's a little bit of kissing up, but I really, really wanted her as my agent. And then the last sentence of this is giving a quick description of the project, the title, the word count, and it's a humorous, realistic, contemporary YA romance. Then second paragraph is a quick project blurb. And then third, I go into sort of my credentials that I had already published a YA, what my job was at the time, being active in the Society for Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, things I've done for them. And the fact that the reason I'm looking for a new agent is that my first agent had passed away, and that I'm looking for a new agent who'll be excited. And then thank you for your time. I look forward to hearing from you soon. And that's what I sent out to her. And I thought it would be funny to show you what she wrote back. So she did remember me. I was very pleased about that. And this started a 3-month process between the two of us. She loves me. She loves my writing. She hated that book. So I sent her another book. She loves me. She loves my writing. She can't sell that book. So I sent her another book. Right. And finally, she was in Florida and she was like, let's just get together. And we had a 3-hour meeting and she signed me as a client. And I wrote a brand new book that she started shopping. And eventually what she sold for me was an adult romance. So what I queried for ended up not being what sold, but it did get me an agent. So I thought it was worth showing you as an example. I wanted to talk about in the query project, there's different types of blurbs, and it's good to have both of them, and it's good to do them even before you're done writing the book. It helps you sort of focus on the concept that you're working on. But the 1-paragraph blurb is something that you would use just really specifically in a query letter. So it's going to have a one-line hook. It's going to give us a main character, give us the stage of their life, tells us the main conflict, hints at a unique approach to solving the conflict, hints at the ending, but doesn't give it away. And then you also want to have on hand a 2 to 3 paragraph blurb, because this often is the second or third step of a going back and forth with an editor or an agent. And this is going to expand that 1 paragraph blurb and give more detail. So it's going to get into the goal, motivation, and conflict of your character. It's going to include major plot points, but it does not give away the twist or the ending of your project. And basically it should read like flap copy, which is if you pick up a paperback at the bookstore and you flip it over on the back, there's usually that 2 or 3 paragraph description of the book. That's kind of what you're writing. So it's meant to entice or to sell the book, not necessarily, it's not an outline, it's not a synopsis, it's more of a selling tool, a marketing tool. And you might include comps at this point as well, which is a whole other discussion. So 1 paragraph is for the query, and then 2 or 3 paragraph you have on hand for when they ask for more. So I thought I'd give you 2 examples of the 1 paragraph that I would use in a query, and then the 2 paragraphs. And you can see they're both pretty long paragraphs, right? You do have some room to use your writerly voice, and those things that make your writing unique should start coming through as early as the query letter, and then definitely in your blurbs. And again, Tracy's going to send this to you, so you'll have time to look more closely at these on your own. And then the last part of my presentation is just some resources that I looked for you. Jonathan Mayberry is a young adult author who is so incredibly generous with his time and talent and supporting other authors. And he has a whole section on his website called Free Stuff for Writers. But he's also shared a successful query letter of his, several synopses examples, all the things that I said for a query package. He's got examples of it on his website. So I wanted to direct you to that. And then this is an agent and writer. And then this is just a YouTube video that goes through some of the basics of query writing. So I hope this will be helpful to you in thinking about it. And I am going to turn it over to Cory now.
Thank you. I was trying to find a picture for you guys, which I should have done earlier, of the tweet that I pitched my book in that actually got me my agent. Because I got an agent with a Twitter pitch, which is a way that some people do. And I'll find it eventually so I can read it to you guys. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how you research agents, how you figure out what your list is of who you're going to pitch to. I had written a pitch. I'd written up some of a manuscript and pitched it to Harlequin's Digital First imprint, which will take unfinished manuscripts and sign you on that without an agent. And they had said they wanted a full manuscript. And so I was finishing it and waiting to hear back from them. And since I had a full manuscript, I decided that I would also query to some agents. And there are a lot of ways to query. There's the sort of cold query. There's the slush pile, which is how most people get agents, which is they send this letter to an agent who's taking queries, who's open, and because they've done research, and that agent pulls their letter out of their email and says, yes, this sounds interesting to me, and signs them that way. That's the majority of people get signed that way. I found that one of my writerly skills is writing a 280 character pitch for my book. And so I entered different pitch contests that agents follow on Twitter, and they like your tweet if they want you to send them a query. And I did several of those. And the last one that I did was DV Pit, which is a diversity pitch contest specifically for marginalized authors. My dream agent, so I had sent out, I probably queried 40 agents, some of them cold pitches that I had found, and some of them people who had liked my tweets on pitch contests. And I had never even considered querying the person that I ended up with, because she just seemed like so out of my league. She was this like phenomenal, she was putting out all of these like really big deal queer books that were like making New York Times lists and like getting movies made of them. And I was like, I don't think that I should query this person. Like, I'm this little, you know, unknown debut author. And so when she liked my tweet for DV Pit, I was like, oh my God, oh gosh, what do I do now? But thankfully I had written a Twitter, I had a package ready to go, right? Because I'd already done this 45 times. And I had a spreadsheet of agents. And so I want to talk about, I'll show you guys my query letter. And I'll talk about, she was a second agent who offered me a contract. Because the first agent who offered me a contract, I did some digging on, and it turned out that the agency that she was with only sold books to like digital first imprints who you can query without an agent. So they weren't selling to print first publishers. They were selling to people that you didn't need an agent to sell to. They had a lot of brand new agents who no one was giving them any mentoring. So it was a very kind of shady situation. There are lots of things that you should look for when you are researching an agent. Writer Beware is a great website that will help you kind of figure out if anyone is taking your money at any part of the query process, that's shady. It should always be free. There are forums that at Absolute Right, WRITE, that you can look, and people have talked about their different experiences with different agents over the years. So if somebody has had a really negative experience with an agent, you can find out good information about that. So that the first person who offered me a contract, it turned out was what's often called a schmagent. So like kind of an agent, but not really. She has sold some books since, but at the time she hadn't sold any, and all of them have been sold to people that I could have queried without an agent. So I turned her down, which is a really hard thing to do as a new author who's trying to break in. You get this call, right? You get a call, an agent calls you and says, I want to talk to you about a contract. And they talk to you about your book, and then they offer you a contract, and then you have to decide whether to take it or not. And it feels like this is the biggest thing that's ever happened in your life. Someone's offering me a book contract. I can't turn it down. But it's really important to do some really big due diligence, because you're signing a legal contract with this person to be the person who represents your work and sells your work and negotiates for higher advances for your work and gets your deals with your royalties. And so you got to do some research. I'm a librarian by trade and training, so I like to do research. And so I made a list by going to, there's a website called Manuscript Wishlist. And there you can see what people sell, because agents exist because they have a relationship with editors, right? Because editors won't just take your manuscript. And so you want an agent who knows your little corner of the world, right? So I don't want an agent who normally sells picture books, because I need someone who knows how to go to the editors who publish queer romance and sell to them and who have a relationship with them. So I needed people who had sold books before in my genre, who took on clients like me. So I needed either queer agents or agents who were open to queer clients, who knew how to deal with queer books, who were going to be open to that, right? Some people don't write books with marginalized characters, so it's not as big of a problem in terms of like weeding out the homophobes was like part of my list process. And so I made a list of probably 25 agents who had taken on projects like mine in the past, who were open to queries. And the way that you can find that out is either by looking on their website, the agent website, or on their Twitter. It'll say closed or open. Please don't submit your beautiful query package to an agent who is closed to queries. They will delete your email, and you will have done all of that amazing work for no reason, right? Please be aware of whether or not they're open. And you can just keep an eye on it, and every couple of months go back and see if they've opened back up again. Because if you find an agent who you think is really perfect, but they're closed, they're going to eventually open to queries again. Agents close down to queries sometimes so that they can get through their backlog and make sure that they're helping the clients that they've already signed. So Marjetta talked about like listening to what the agent says they want really specifically. And that I think is the most important. Some of them have a website called Query Manager, which is nice because it has little blanks and you just fill out the blanks and give them exactly what they want. But I've heard over and over again from agents that if you just fill out the query paperwork the way they ask you to, you're already like ahead of 90% of the other people who query them. So you're already going to get your package looked at, right? If you just like make sure that you are gendering them correctly in your thing, right? Don't say Ms. if it's a Mr. or whatever. Make sure you put the things that they asked for in the package, and you're likely to get your manuscript read. Make sure that they are people who actually, you know, they're not a children's person if you write YA, or they're not a YA person if you write romance or whatever. And so I made a list, and then spell the agent's name correctly is really super important. They want to know that you're paying attention, right? So I made a list and I started to, Marjetta said, you know, 5 people at a time. I think I sent out 10 at a time, but I think that 5 to 10 is your absolute max, because you want to know how many you've got out there. And I had a spreadsheet, and I put everything that I found out about that agent, right? Are they open to queries right now? Why did I choose them? Like something to remind myself about what it was about them that I thought would work well for my project. A link to their manuscript wish list, a link to their query manager. They have, all agents have different timelines that they put on their websites that say, we'll get back to you within 4 weeks, or we generally get back within 6 weeks. Some agents will send a no, and some agents, if you haven't heard from them in 6 weeks, it's automatically a no, right? Some only respond to yeses. So I would leave myself notes about like, do not follow up with this one follow up after 12 weeks. Because a lot of agents want you to follow up with them and some really don't. So I would like go do the research, and I had a column for all of that information. And then I color coded my spreadsheet. If I got an absolute hard pass, I put it in red. If I got a yes, please send full, I would put it in green, right? And so I was able to kind of keep track of who do I have work out to, who have I heard back from, where are we at in the process? Because you don't want to query someone else at the same agency, right? If you've already queried with one agent in that agency, usually there's a rule that you can only do one person in an agency at a time. So one is like, which agency are they with? What date did I send out my query letter? What date should I have heard back from? Just really keeping all of that. And I am not a super type A color-coded spreadsheet kind of a person, but this process has so many moving parts with so many different things wanted by different agents that I really needed to have it in one place, keeping track of it so that I could remember. And one of the reasons that you need that is that if you get a request for a contract, the done thing, and this is again, Marjetta was saying that there's all this etiquette, right? And the etiquette doesn't exist for anything but the querying process. There is a huge amount of language that only exists for the querying process. And there's a huge amount of etiquette that only exists for the querying process. And it's kind of, everyone in publishing knows it. And if you're new to publishing, you can only find out by kind of like reading a bunch of blogs about it and talking to people and doing whatever social media you do, joining Facebook writers groups. You really have to start listening, because people expect you to speak that language and understand those rules of engagement that are not clear. So one of the done things is that if you get offered a contract, you go back to everyone else who has a full copy of your manuscript and say, I have gotten offered a contract. I need 2 weeks. Get back to me within 2 weeks about whether or not you also want to offer me a contract. Because sometimes agents take 6 months or a year to get through their full manuscripts. And so you may not hear back from somebody for a very long time. But if they know that you're about to sign with someone else, they will really quick go ahead and read your manuscript, because they might not want to miss out on you. And so you say to the agent on the phone, I will need 2 weeks, I'll get back to you on this date. And then you email everyone else and say, oh, I have an offer, please get back to me by X date. And then if you're like super lucky, you have a lot of people, you have a lot of offers, and you have to decide which agent is going to be best for you. But if you're like most of us, you have one offer and it's hopefully a good one and you get to say yes to it. So that whole process, there's just a lot of moving pieces, and it's really helpful to find a community before you're ready to query of just a few people who you can text or DM or whatever and say, who have been through it before, and say, I don't know what's happening. I don't understand what part of the process I'm on. This seems crazy. There are a lot of good blog posts out there. Some of them seem completely contradictory to each other. So it's just always good to have somebody else you can reach out to and say, I don't know what's happening with this. I love Eric Smith's blog about, I think his blog is called Eric Smith Rocks. He's an agent and a writer. And he has a bunch of examples of query letters of people he's signed. And he goes through and breaks them down about what part works for him on all of them. And I found that really, really helpful when I was getting started with trying to write mine. And then I had a friend who had successfully signed with an agent go over it and tell me what she thought worked. So that was all really important to me. I'm going to show you mine. If I can get sharing permissions. Nope, I can do it. Okay. Let's see. No. Yes. Okay. It's gonna, okay. Can you guys see my query letter when I do this? Okay. Okay. So this first paragraph is really short because I'm going to add information to it. Okay. So I would have said, like, dear so-and-so, your manuscript wish list says that you are looking for small town, diverse romance with artists. Or I would have said, you liked my tweet in DV Pit, and here is the tweet that you liked, just to remind you. Or I would have said, I am writing to you because I see that you have several books, similar to mine in, you often represent books similar to mine. Something to show that I paid attention to who they are and I know that they represent stuff like I write, or to remind them what our connection is, right? Then I'm going to do a really short pitch for my one sentence hook. This millennial queer take on a made-for-TV Christmas movie is Hallmark but gayer. And then I'm going to say there are all of these people who work at different places, who publish books, who have already asked for it. I have a bunch of interest. Carina Press, Forever, which is who I ended up selling to, That's an imprint of Hachette, Wednesday, St. Martin's. So I'm saying upfront, you may want to take this book on because there's a lot of interest from editors and it's going to be easy to sell. So I've said this, I love you, right? Here's all the things that I think you're super great. You represent books that I really like. We have a lot in common. Your manuscript wish list looks like would be a great mix. My book is going to be really easy to sell. And then I actually have 2 paragraphs of what my book is, but because it's a romance novel, I have both characters. Okay. So Miriam Bloom has a successful career making art out of upcycled antiques. So I'm talking about who the 2 characters are. I talk about who Miriam is and who Noelle is. And then my little plot hook, the great aunt who helped raise her dies, and she goes to the Adirondacks to sit Shiva, and surprise, she inherited a portion of the country's only Jewish-owned Christmas tree farm. So I'm trying to get a little bit of humor in so they understand the voice of the book. I'm giving the problem, which is that she has to save the farm from bankruptcy, and then the conflict, which is that she's got this great life, but she has to choose between that and like falling in love with the forestry manager at the farm, so that the person automatically, within 2 paragraphs, kind of gets the vibe of the book, and the stakes. And then this is important. Marjetta had this at the top of her letter, but you need it somewhere. You need to say what your genre is, right? Contemporary romance, and then how many words it is. Agents want to see that you have done some research on how long books in your genre are when they're published. And so they want to be able to see upfront that you understand basically how many words a middle grade book is, or a picture book is, or a rom-com is. So I have comps, which is 2 books that are sort of similar to my book, so that the agent can automatically get an idea of what we're talking about. And then because I don't have a very interesting writing bio, I kept my biography very, very brief. Helena Greer is my pen name, and what my Twitter is under. So I wanted them to be able to recognize me if they'd seen me on Twitter. And so that's very similar pieces to Marjetta's in a slightly different, and a very similar, mine is, right, here's the, I love you, my book is easy to sell, here's what it is, you're gonna love it, and like, love me, but the love me is very short. But it's a very similar format. So that query letter got me a ton of requests for full manuscripts. I sent out a lot of full manuscripts. I got several passes. It was a debut novel. I was probably querying it a little earlier than I ought to have in terms of how polished it was, which is something that a lot of people do. And my agent, Becca Podos, called me and said, I really love this book. It needs so much work. Do you want to rewrite it? And I said, yes, I really do. And then I rewrote it, and then we submitted it to editors, and then I sold it to the 3rd biggest publisher in the world for a 2-book deal. So it turned out okay. In the end, it was a long process, but there are pieces that are always the same for everyone, right? You need a query letter, and that works. You need to be sure that the person that you're querying is somebody who's above board, maybe has sold some books before. I think it's really important to know what your vision for the book is, right? Do you want it to get out to a small audience? Do you want a really indie press that's going to give you a lot of room to do something interesting and weird? I wanted this particular book. I'm going to write some very weird graphic novels later. I wanted this book on like airport shelves. I wanted an illustrated cover of like 2 girls looking cutesy and leaning into each other and kissing. I haven't seen my cover yet. I don't know what it looks like, but I wanted like a bright pink illustrated cover, and I wanted it on airport shelves, which meant that I needed a big publisher. And so when I talked to my agent on the phone, the first phone call, I said, my vision for this book is that I want it big. I don't want to go to somebody digital first, even though I love ebooks and I read digital first, and I think it's a great way to break into the market. So it's important to know that the agent you're querying has already sold the kind of books you want to sell and has sold them to the people you want to sell them to. Because that's a really schmoozy relationship. It's like, oh, I just wanted you to know that I've got this book and I think you're going to love it. It's really similar and I'm going to be subbing it to you next month. And it's very like everybody has drinks in New York when it's not COVID. And everybody gets to know each other. And it's like very much built on schmoozing. And so you need someone who already has the relationships. And so that's the really important research. There was a question. So I queried my agent. I queried my agent and then my agent submitted it to editors. And I'm gonna leave it to Kimberly to talk about picture books.
Okay, she covered a lot of the process, and Marjetta gave you some of the basics. I'm trying to think if I can help in any other way. Some things that I can think about is comps. Comps are very important, and they should be very new comps, like in 5 years. Some people say 5 to 10 years, but I'm hearing within 5 years. Your comps are books that are like the one you're writing, and they're very important. Another thing to know about agents is some of them are developmental or editorial, and some are not. Cory's agent was a developmental editorial agent. She was willing to help her write it again. Some agents only want experienced authors who know what they're doing, and they don't want to help you get it perfect. So I am so lucky to have been doing these panels because I met Marjetta, and Marjetta introduced me to Joyce Sweeney. Yay! And I have been quoting Joyce as an example. And that's another thing to sort of remember. Everything is like relationships, right? And things like that. I have published 3 picture books and 3 textbooks, but I do not have an agent. I am trying to get an agent, and I have written to Joyce Sweeney because Marjetta gave me that introduction. Okay? So I submitted to Joyce. In my package, there was a query letter, 5 pages of a middle grade novel, a synopsis of the whole novel. Okay? That was in my package. She said, I like those 5 at first she said, you need to change this, this, and this. And then I changed that and resubmitted it. Okay? And then she liked it and said, submit the whole novel. This is my resubmission. Dear Joyce Sweeney, I am resubmitting to you with your permission and greetings from Marjetta. I am querying Dancing in the Sun, a character-driven, contemporary, own voices early middle grade novel with heart of approximately 25,000 words. That was my opening. And then I have kind of like a medium range. The first sentence kind of says everything, and then I elaborate a little bit more. Some people just want one sentence. Some people want a paragraph. It depends on what they ask for. Here's like my pitch for it. When Elena's family moves from Paducah, Kentucky to Elk Grove, California, this 11-year-old African-American girl must confront bullies, learn how to fit in at her new school, and navigate her first crush, all while believing in herself. And that's kind of like a 1-sentence pitch, right? Then I elaborate a little bit more. But when you feel so far from home, dealing with mean girls in your first middle school dance isn't easy. And Elena has to find a different kind of courage and insight to understand her new relationships with powerhouse Nora, mean girl Jasmine, and Hank, a cute fellow who's been showing her around school. She's not always graceful, but soon she realizes that despite being a small town girl, or maybe because of it, she's enough. So that's kind of my novel in a pitch, right? It's what you call a kind of quiet story. It might be a little bit of a romance for middle grade, right? What do you do in middle grade? You hold hands, right? So it's kind of like a middle grade romance, also a school adjustment story. Then I have my comps, New Kid and My Life as an Ice Cream Sandwich. Okay. New Kid is a graphic novel, but it talks about cross culture and changing schools and stuff like that. My Life as an Ice Cream Sandwich isn't set in the school setting, but it talks about the difference between rural life and city life. And then I have themes. This is like a new thing that's kind of come up for books. And I have, my book is Moves and Adjustment, the Strength of Community and Diversity, and Hope for the Future. And then it goes on, and I describe myself. I said I've published 3 picture books, and I also write textbooks, and I describe myself. I tell her my different social media outlets and my website and stuff like that. And I say, I look forward to further communication and collaboration in preparation for full manuscript submission. I have 2 editors waiting for me to submit to them. And I told Joyce about that, Mrs. Sweeney. And I'm hoping she'll go with me on this journey, much like Cory's agent, so that I can submit to these 2 editors who are waiting for me to submit. So that's kind of like that one. And then Joyce told me, I just got an email for her today, actually, saying that she's doing a few things. She's really seriously considering me, and she'll get back to me in about 3 weeks. And that's because I also have a picture book manuscript where an editor is waiting for it, but she said, get an agent first. And that book, I queried Joyce last week. And it's pretty much the same outline, but this is a picture book. So it's only 594 words versus the 25,000 words, right? It's a different character. Her name is Priscilla. She lives on a farm. She finds a baby goose one day on her farm. And the story goes on and on and on. And so I do have an editor who I had submitted it to, who's like, oh, I like what you've done, change a few things, get an agent, and then submit to me. So I submitted it to her, I made the changes that the editor said. I submitted it to Joyce last week, and she got back to me today and said, it's wonderful. She's very interested. She's really seriously considering me, both my middle grade and my picture book, and she'll get back to me in 3 weeks. So now I wait, and I wait. But while I'm waiting, I have other picture ideas that I have, and I'm hoping my middle grade turns into a series, and I already have the ideas in my head. So I'm getting ready for that. I'm ready, right? So I worked on my 2 picture book ideas and the 2 other books in my middle grade series while I'm waiting for her to get back to me in case she says she wants to work with me. And that's what I'm hoping. Now, I can also talk about textbooks. Is there anyone interested in submitting for a textbook? Because I can talk about that as well. It's very different. You don't need an agent. Some people do have agents, but it's not needed. Anyone interested? No? Oh, okay, yes, I saw one hand raised. How do you find the agents to research and query? Okay, I have a question and one hand raised. To find the agents to research and query, I say for children's literature, right? Join different groups, go to workshops. There's a book called The Children's Market, Children's Literature Market. You can buy that at Barnes & Noble. If you join SCBWI, Society for Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, you can go to their conferences, and then the agents that speak there let you submit to them, even if they're already closed. Also, they have a book called The Book, SCBWI. If you become a member, they have a book, and it's called The Book. It has everything you need to know. Also, you get your comps. Look at the comps that you have, right? And the comps you have, find out who their agent is. Manuscript wish list, like Cory talked about. That's a real good way to do it. Manuscript wish list. And then I had one hand raised, interested in textbook writing. So in textbooks, you get an idea. You look out there and how yours is different. Or maybe there's nothing out there like it at all. Then you create a proposal. The proposal has a rationale, and that's about a paragraph or two. Readership. So what college students or high school students are going to read your textbook? Which specific class is the textbook for? Who's going to read it? What professional societies might help? Then you do a chapter by chapter synopsis. After your synopsis, you talk about the competition. That's like a comp, right? In children's book. In children's books writing, you call them comps. Here they talk about the competition. Who has a book that's like yours? And why is yours different? Then you talk about the themes or topics that cover in the book. Then you give them your resume or vita. Tell them how long it will take you to finish it. And it usually takes 3 years to write a textbook or longer. And then you suggest people who are going to review it, your proposal. Who can review your proposal? So you write experts in the field who can review your proposal. Okay? And that's kind of how you do a proposal for textbooks. It's a little bit more different. It's based on research. My writing is different, like my word choice is different when I'm writing a textbook proposal versus a query letter for children's literature, right? And you have to also research the publishers and the editors to see what they like, what they don't like. You can go on their website, just like children's books. And then they will have something called proposal outline, and it'll tell you their proposal outline. I gave you a basic proposal outline, but sometimes they have different ways. You know, each publisher is a little different at what they want. And so that's my contribution for today. Thank you for listening.
And say, for those of you who are at the point where you want to start looking, a place you can start is the agency where my agent is, and actually so is Joyce Sweeney. If you just Google the Seymour Agency, I'm putting it in the chat, you'll see they have a section where all of the agents in the agency have a little bio, and it says what they represent and what they're looking for. So I think just looking at that would kind of give you an idea of their personalities and what they're looking for. And every agency has some kind of presence like that. So
I said this in the chat, but Publishers Marketplace is invaluable. It's like $25 a month, which is really steep if you are, you know, anybody. I mean, it's an extra $25 a month. You don't have to have it forever, but if you just start trying to figure out what agents sell your stuff, if you buy 1 month or go in with someone else for a month subscription, you can go and look under all of the deal makers and see the names of all of the agents who are selling stuff that's similar to yours. Instead of trying to like Google literary agents, you can go, because that's where every single deal is posted. So it's worth to, I mean, if you have the $25 for a month subscription, it's worth it to skip out on the hours and hours and hours of Google.
And I do want to say that for those of you getting started, going to things like this is your first step in querying, because, you know, Kimberly said that I referred her to Joyce. After I met Kimberly, I got on my phone to Joyce, who I've known since 2001, and was like, oh my gosh, I just met this amazing writer who sold 3 picture books on her own. Can you believe she did that without an agent? You have to take her on. And Joyce was like, she can query me. And I was like, no, you have to take her. She's so wonderful. And Joyce was like, she can query me. You know, she has to like keep the boundary. But when I was querying my agent, I showed you in my letter, you know, my friends Kate and Stacy, they were behind the scenes telling Nicole, you know, Marjetta is going to query you. You know that Marjetta wants you more than any other agent. You know, so it's about these networks, it's about these groups, it's about the connections that we make that really help us move forward. So yeah, so you're already on the right path if you're just getting started.